Coming to you from the Tar Heel State, this is the Carolina Commercial Real Estate Connection, bringing you industry insights and hot takes from Carolina real estate experts, helping you begin, grow, and scale your commercial real estate portfolio. And now your hosts, Tony Johnson and Cameron Pearson.
Welcome back to Carolina Commercial Real Estate Connection. Today we have Cole Bigbee with us. Cole, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day and joining us. Could you take a moment and give us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what you've been doing in the past and what you're doing now?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. So I grew up in a construction family. My grandfather started our metal building company, Bigbee Steel Buildings, in 1962. He used to be a two-man show. They used to build frames and weld them up in the back of a shop, and they used to buy sheets and trim from other places, and then they would go out and put up metal buildings. So back in the 60s, you could imagine when most stuff was wood framed, coming in with steel and building metal buildings was kind of a thing of the future. And my grandfather and my dad and his brother, they've worked hard since that time and era, and they've brought this company into what it is today, when we are a leading manufacturer of metal buildings, where we are a member of the Metal Building Manufacturers Association. And we build in roughly about 30 states right now. We manufacture and deliver to site. We don't actually do any of the construction work anymore, just the design, engineering, and manufacturing of the buildings. So.
Wow, that's great. Now, so when someone's doing a pre-engineered metal building, do you just sell to anyone that is interested in buying, or do you just typically sell to pre-engineered metal building erectors?
We sell to anybody and everybody, but most of our clientele are either general contractors and developers. We have a few individuals that kind of buy from us, but for the most part, it is general contractors and developers that just mostly deal in commercial real estate.
That's awesome. Now, when you guys manufacture at your plant?
We do. We manufacture right here in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. So we have roughly about 300,000 square foot under roof, and we have big draw-through welders. We have paint booths. We have, our engineering department that designs it. We have roll forming machines. So, we buy out very little other than the raw material itself.
And for the GC, how tough is it for them to put it together once it gets on site?
Well, that's one of the things, since we've been doing it so long, we kind of pride ourselves on being a metal building that fits together pretty easily. So when you buy like a pre-engineered metal building, it comes with the holes pre-punched, and if everything works out right, it should all align correctly in the field where it just bolts together. So there should be no welding involved. There's a little cutting on the trim, but for the most part, it is supposed to go together without any welding.
Wow, that's cool.
Have you seen a lot? I know, when your grandfather and your father and your brother were doing it, there's a lot that's changed even in the last decade, right? So pre-engineered metal buildings now are going up everywhere. I know a decade ago they weren't, they were used a lot more for barns and, non-heated spaces, right? So these days, people are building huge 25, 30, 40,000 pre-engineered metal buildings for their companies. They're getting them fully insulated, as opposed to prior, they would just not insulate them at all, right? And they would just build them almost like a barn building. Now they're getting them fully insulated packages where they can heat and condition the entire building. Isn't there a package that you offer? I think it's called a simple saver system. Could you detail that a little bit so people understand some of the options that you guys are providing on it?
Yeah, so you're correctly right. Exactly right, that metal buildings used to be just warehouses and barns, but here in the past 10 years, you might not know, but you drive by, say, a brick building or one with like a masonry or EIFS facade, and there's liable to be a metal building behind that, most likely. So the application uses are almost unlimited right now. And that's the thing. There's so many great insulation systems and ways to set them up that they can accommodate an office building. I've even seen them do them, low-rise single-story apartments. And one of the big things across the industry, and it's not just metal buildings, but it's even companies out there as far as going green and, how can we be more energy efficient? And the insulation system packages are part of that. And that system you were talking about, the Simple Saver system, it's it's a fairly thick system. I think it starts at a minimum of R25, which for those that don't know, that's the R value that measures, the insulation and as far as thicknesses go, like we would call an R25, 8 inches. And so that's almost a double layer system that you're going to get inside that building that's going to help you keep your heating and cooling costs down over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that the R is a thermal barrier, right, for the building. And the nice thing about these thermal barriers in a pre-engineered metal building company is it's not just shoved between the studs like it is on a residential structure when you get normal bat insulation. This insulation system normally comes in 4-foot wide rolls on a pre-engineered metal building, and those actually they go behind the steel, and then they put the roof on top, giving full coverage, so you don't have those gaps like you have in traditional construction. Isn't that correct also?
That's right. Yeah. So the purlins, I guess, are the members that run perpendicular to your metal building frames. That insulation will lay in there. And like you said, 4-foot wide strip, and then they'll come back with another strip and roll it, the opposite way. So almost crossing over. And then when they get those roof systems, they put a higher clip on them to offset them off that insulation so it doesn't compresses down and you don't lose that R value on it. And so that helps you get the maximum amount of coverage and insulation.
Yeah, so that is amazing when you think about it. So that when we're looking at comparing a pre-engineered metal building to, let's say, a steel building, steel and block building, could you kind of give us a comparison of cost and value and differences, maybe time frame of building? What are some advantages and disadvantages of the pre-engineered metal building to a different commercial construction application?
Sure. So like if you'll go in a typical grocery store most of the time, or even a Walmart per se, you'll look up and you'll see a bar joist style building on block, and you'll see metal decking. And then there's a system they call a TPO roof on top of that, which that's not a true metal building. That's a structural building. Metal buildings for us, normally they are best on 100,000 square foot or less square footage. Not super, they can go clear spans that are wide, but their design is more positioned better, I guess, for warehousing, small retail type stores, churches, gymnasiums. And, some of the downfalls, I guess, are metal buildings is you don't go 3 stories on a metal building like you would a structural building. So 2 stories is about as tall as you're going to get with some of those. The advantages are they do go up quicker. So when an erector shows up for a metal building, most of the time, if it's a traditional metal building, he'll pretty much, when he leaves, you have an enclosed structure that you can go to work in. Whereas in a structural type job, it's not like that. So you might have to set the structural steel, wait on a block guy to come set the block, wait on a door guy to come put in the doors. So, it's just the lag in construction time on a structural building versus an actual metal building.
Yeah, absolutely. So you get the time frame savings, and you're not having to deal with multiple trades just to get to the dry end. So you get the pre-engineered metal building, they drop everything off. By the time the erector is done, you're basically dried in, ready for trades. And just like you say, if you go the traditional structural route with a structural steel building, you're going to have your steel erector out there, then you got to get your mason out there, then you're going to have to get a roofer out there to go on top of the decking to dry you in. So having those additional trades is going to add to your time frame. And obviously the cost of those are more on a structural steel building too than the pre-engineered metal building. So a lot of advantages. And one thing to go back to what you noted is these days, a lot of times you can't even tell, because you'll get the pre-engineered metal building and then they build the facades out front. So typically they'll at least build the front. Sometimes they build the front and the sides. And basically you have your pre-engineered metal building, and then you build structural walls in the front and on the sides to give it the look of a structural steel building, and it's still much less on cost and time frame, right?
That's correct. Yes.
So, that's been the biggest change for pre-engineered metal building companies, in my opinion, is you've gotten that upgraded look that you can get with the pre-engineered metal building company. It's quicker, a lot more cost effective sometimes, like you say, on the smaller buildings. Now, to go back to another thing you mentioned, could you go over how it's typically done when you have 2 stories? How do you guys set them up? And then what do you look to do for someone who wants a 2-story or a mezzanine or something?
Well, we will do the actual mezzanine design and incorporate that with our steel package. So, being the same, when the erector shows up, he can go ahead and frame that second floor out for you too, and have it ready to, I guess, if you're going to put concrete on it or plywood and whatever kind of flooring. So when the metal building erector leaves, you've got your 2-story building ready to frame to go. So, and we've done those quite a bit. You see a lot more industrial applications, going 2 stories, not in all areas of their building, but in certain areas, where they can either set equipment on top or maybe stick a couple of warehouse or industrial offices up top. We've done some 2-story self-storage facilities where they build the mezzanine, come in up top and build their storage units. And then a couple of just, nice office buildings that didn't want to go more than 2 stories. So, having us do the mezzanine, it just makes it a lot easier, a lot faster. And that when we handle all of the design in one, it's just going to make it that much cleaner and easier as you go down the line. So.
Yeah, I think, and Cameron, tell me if I'm wrong, you don't deal a lot in pre-engineered metal buildings. Me,
Right.
I hear them every day. So when you think of a pre-engineered metal building, do you normally think of them being 2-story? I think that's something maybe a lot of people don't understand, that you can do that.
Yeah, not at all. So, I'm still kind of the old school thought, thinking that when you say metal building, it's almost that shell, you don't even, all the other stuff we've just discussed is new to me. So that's fantastic.
Right. Yeah. So it really is a lot more versatile, I think, these days than people really can envision. I mean, when you're designing the building, you're just doing those sidewalls taller, and then you infill that mezzanine and second floor, and you can really create something gorgeous with these pre-engineered metal buildings. When you're doing that those tall sidewalls, and then you just build a facade in front, it just looks like a normal 2-story steel structure.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't even know it, like you said. So unless it was somebody like
Right.
you and I that built it, I mean, we can make it look like completely, totally different from a metal building, but the inside, you walk in, it's metal building framing. So.
And with the whole tiny home craze that's happening now, are you seeing some transitions into more of the residential use too, as well?
We get a few calls on residential buildings, not necessarily tiny homes, but a lot of people want what they call a barn dominium or a barn shop or a house. And we might do 4 or 5 a year, but, really for us, I think the big thing is people want them to look like houses, but they want them built by a metal building guy. And it's not that we can't do them and don't want to do them. It's just I have to tell them, hey, this does cost more when you are
Yeah.
framing a house this way, because when you go inside, you're going to frame up a wall again.
Yeah.
And then you have a metal building wall on the outside. So you're framing a wall twice. And so I try to explain that to people, that you're not dealing with it.
I have had multiple people, call me and say, we want to do a barn dominium house. We think, and their initial thought is that it's going to be less expensive. 9 times out of 10, I'm like, this is going to be way more expensive, right? I mean, it's going to be more versatile. You can get a clear span, you get more of an open, huge space. But that's the advantage. You still have extra framing, like you see on the inside. I think people still to this day, the biggest confusion with a pre-engineered metal building is they'll see national companies like a General Steel promote these buildings online, and it's just almost a misrepresentation and creates confusion in the market.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, and when like I said, the few that I do a year, I mean, they almost are just straight gable style, look like barns, and it's real simple. So the homeowner is going to go in there and do most of the work himself, which is a different story on cost savings. But people off the street that they're first time home builders, and hey, this is what I want. And you try to explain to them like, hey, we can do it, but when you go inside, you're not framing around a 2x4, you're framing around a 12-inch member. So you're losing space in certain areas, and there's certain things you're going to have to contend with that you don't contend with on actual wood type construction. So, I just try to make that clear up front. how ours are different, and then let them make the decision if they do want to go forward with us doing it or not. Because, you know, Tony, just like you said, it's not any cheaper. I mean, it's technically it's more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to, I know you were telling me earlier, 100,000 square feet or less, and positioned good for warehouse and offices. So could you tell us any recent, or in the last year or two, any recent projects that your company undertook where the building was unique, challenging, or something different that people could kind of envision? Have you done any weird buildings that you wouldn't think somebody would do at a pre-engineered metal building, for instance?
Every project we do is custom work, and just when you think you've seen it all, there'll always be something new and different come in every year. So in our company, we manufacture a lot of Dollar General buildings. Well, most of them, in your standard rural town are going to look standard, but we do some that go to like the coast in Florida and South Alabama, and they look like castles. You know what I
Is that
mean? You
right?
look at them, yeah. I mean, they've got towers coming out of them at each end, and it just looks like somebody built a sandcastle, and those are metal buildings behind it. So I've done some really cool gymnasiums with walking tracks, and they had masonry facades and canopies coming out of them that were really just showstoppers in my opinion. And then of course, the standard metal building job is great, but I kind of pride myself on doing the unique projects, the one-offs that nobody else wants to do. And I feel like our company's probably thrived more on doing the specialty type projects than they have been just doing a standard, just simple warehouse building.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think, people who aren't thinking about this every day, we might be opening up some ideas for people as they're thinking, getting into buying some raw land, looking to develop. They always need to consider a pre-engineered metal building if they can do it. I think that that's always the most initial cost-effective way to do a good commercial project for yourself. If you can make it work on a pre-engineered metal building, that's always your best first option, right? Only when you can't do that do you need to start looking at other types of construction. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's best, if they reach out to somebody like you, if they don't know about metal buildings, and you can educate them, or you can set them up with somebody like me, or even an architect that's familiar with them, and at least find out if what they want to do is going to be feasible with the metal building. And if not, hey, like you said, you go to the next step. So,
yeah. So look into the future. What do you see any trends happening in the pre-engineered metal building industry that we should look out for, or anything new you see coming around the corner for the industry?
well, like you were talking about the thicker insulation earlier, it seems like every year, these energy codes change and they want thicker insulation. Well, thicker insulation in the roof and in the walls. You see a lot of insulated metal wall panels coming out more. And two, essentially pretty much any kind of area with a municipality that has a building department, most of the time they don't want any kind of metal panel exterior on anything that's built inside the city limits anymore. So the days of maybe seeing metal panels inside the city limits, I think, are over. I think everything's going to strictly, masonry, I guess, exterior, unless you get in an industrial style area. But that's kind of the trends I'm seeing, is still a metal building, but, getting away from like the metal panel walls.
And have you, one last question on this, then we're going to transition because you have a whole nother business that you're working. So the last question on this is, have you seen a huge uptick in the past few years with industrial? I know with e-commerce and growth, everyone is saying industrial has really blown up. Have you guys seen a huge uptick in business in the past few years?
Yeah, 100%. So when COVID hit, that changed the game for everybody. And the ones that were ahead, you saw the warehouse orders increasing. If we weren't getting them, we were definitely getting calls on them. And I think the biggest thing back then, which it was the same with you, is when can we get it? So, if we could have done we probably could have done 1 million warehouses in the past 3 years. We just didn't have the capacity to do that many. And, the thing too, even still with the higher interest rates right now, that industrial construction, warehouse type construction hasn't slowed down much, at least not what I'm seeing in our area in the Southeast.
No, it really hasn't. And it's just, the reality is it's still a less expensive cost per foot. So it still, numbers kind of work. Now, the lease tenant rates, the lease rates have gone up a little bit, but, comparatively speaking to some of the other commercial industries, it's still significantly lower. to get in an industrial space than a retail space, which has gone through the roof, and some of these Class A office are through the roof right now on pricing. So
That's right.
that kind of pushes us into your other business venture, which you are also, not only do you do the pre-engineered metal buildings, you're also an industrial investor. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
And
Yes.
you
So
do new development?
I do. Yeah. So about 7 or 8 years ago, I had messed with a few residential houses, and my great uncle, who came from a commercial construction background, he was like, why don't you get into commercial development? He's like, you have a cost advantage. He said, the knowledge of doing these residentials isn't just a whole lot different. He said, there's some things you have to learn. And, the more I got to thinking about it, I was like, he is right. And I've been fortunate enough to work with developers through Bigbee Steel that I've kind of learned, okay, these are the mistakes they are making. How can I not make those mistakes? But then two, how can I profit from what I'm doing? Because I do have the knowledge and the advantages in this industry. So I started buying some smaller warehouses, renovating them, putting tenants in them, and either selling them or holding them, and just kind of worked my way up where I started doing some larger development deals 4 years ago, and still to this day I'm active in that.
Wow.
And the development, you're still utilizing the steel buildings as well, or is it just?
Absolutely. Yeah. I won't do it unless it's a steel building, because I don't have I mean, that's my cost advantage. When all these other
That's the
construction
cost
costs have
advantage.
gone up, I'm lesser than anybody else on my engineering and metal building. So that's strictly all I'm doing. And I try to keep it as simple as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so one thing I want to go back and see. So when you got going, so you started with a couple fix and flips with the industrial properties, and then kept some and rented it. So how did you source those then, and how are you sourcing them now? And on top of how are you sourcing them, how did you figure out the financing of them for someone trying to get into that?
What do you mean as far as sourcing them?
So did you find them just driving and finding one in bad condition? Did you befriend or network with agents? Were you mailing for them? How did you start to build some stream of these?
Yeah, so the first one I bought, it actually had a real estate sign down in the grass. The grass had gone real tall, and the real estate agent lived about an hour from here. And I've been driving by this building because I ate lunch by there about twice a week. And I'm like, why isn't nobody buying this building? And I actually just looked up the owner, and it was a bank an hour away from here. And I called the bank, and he's like, yeah, we got a real estate agent that's working that. And I'm like, well, I didn't see a sign out there. But it turns out it had fell in the grass, and so nobody was calling on that. So I was able to work a deal out with them on my first one. And the next one I bought, I was lucky enough that they were having an auction on it. It was just a small 40 by 60 warehouse, but it had an extra acre with it, so I could build some more. So that one was by auction. But when I got into the bigger stuff, I befriended an actual local developer. He was an older gentleman. He was getting towards the end of his career, but that's all he had done for the past 15 years was, develop 10,000 square foot warehouses, couple of offices, couple of restrooms. And he just kept doing that over and over again. But he actually had some additional land that he was willing to part with at a very reasonable price. And he kind of helped set me on that path to really start developing some bigger stuff. Because without that opportunity at the land at the cost that he sold it to me, I don't know if I'd be where I'm at today. So
I think that's great. And, that's something that everyone needs to look out with. I mean, and it's just taking the time to network, get to know people. And I'm sure you weren't just meeting this guy and, trying to weasel him out of some land. I mean, you obviously genuinely got to know the gentleman. You guys connected on a couple levels, and otherwise he wouldn't have just sold it to you for a good deal. He'd been in the business for a long time. So I'm sure he knew he was giving you a good deal, right?
he did, absolutely. Yeah. And he knew it was a great piece of land, but he also knew at his age, it was a 7-acre piece of property. And he kind of knew that he didn't really at his age, he was 87 at the time. And he said, I don't really want to build out this 7 acres when I've been just building out 1 2-acre tracts. He said, I don't want to risk, $2.5 million at this point in my life. This is a very reasonable price for this land. If you want it, you can have it at that. And I didn't even haggle with him. I said, I'll take it. And so that,
Cole, that's great. I think, a lot of people are under the misconception that you almost have to, rob somebody to get a good deal or work them down and give them some unreasonable offer. It's really comes down a lot of times about relationship and, building, that trust and somebody knowing that they're giving it to a respectable person that has integrity and that's going to do the right thing with the land. I mean, when people have owned pieces of property, sometimes 20, 30, 40 years, it's not really about the number. They might have, they have a relationship almost with that piece of property. They want someone that's going to go take care of it, build something quality on there. And, it's just like anything else. When it's been in somebody's family for a long time, it's just about, is somebody going to do something good with this land, or are they just going to destroy it or put something junky on it? And it's kind of, maybe if you give them the vision, that's a big deciding factor for them.
no, I'm like you, it's 100% relationship based. So without that relationship, I don't even know if I would have found out about that land. And since that land, I've got to work with from there, that just one relationship that I started led to another relationship with the industrial real estate agent that he worked with. That also led to another land agent that, goes out and finds deals and bird dogs them. So just from those two relationships, I've continued to get deals based off that one gentleman that I did a deal with. So, and going back to relationships, it is a two-way street. And so I've always tried to be a man of my word, be honest, hey, if those guys need something, when they call me, I pick up the phone and I answer. If I can't answer, I will call them right back. And we can go on and on about how important relationships are, but until you actually start getting involved and, getting in the circle and seeing how they work, I mean, that's just the best way. We can't do this alone. I mean, there's no way any of us could do it alone. So,
well, and that kind of leads us into when you started with the, 1 acre or 2 acre tracts, this 7 acre was a big jump for you. What did you look for as far as financing? What was your game there?
Yeah, that was a huge jump. That was one of those scary ones that, you don't really know you're doing the right thing, but something's telling you, hey, I just need to do this deal and figure it out as I go. Because the deals I'd bought before, small cities, not much for building departments. Hey, build what you want, here you go. So this one was in a larger city in Madison, Alabama, which is in Madison County, which is home to Huntsville. So you're talking 300,000 or 400,000 people just inside this county. So, the first thing we had to do was figure out, okay, what's the best way to lay the most amount of buildings out on this property and, to utilize it. So we figured that out. And then, I got a few drawings done, got a few civil drawings, a few architecturals, and I turned them into the city. And they're like, yeah, you don't have enough information to get permitted, so I realized real quick, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot, and I look back and I'm like, but that was a learning experience, because I just started doing, I tried to ask enough questions to the right people, but at a certain point, you kind of just got to step off the cliff and start doing something for yourself, because my learning style, that's where I feel like I learn best, is by doing. And do I make mistakes? Yes. And so, we started turning in those drawings to the city. We got them kicked back several times, and it took me about 3 to 4 months to get permitted. But during that time, that was almost better than 2 years worth of a college education, what I learned in 4 months. And during that time, again, those drawings, I took on a partner who, he's a GC, but he actually brought a lot of cash to that deal. So that was really the big kicker for me, was finding somebody that had an advantage that I didn't, but two, they could also bring the cash to the deal and help us also get the rest of the financing together. So, bringing that in helped that deal go good.
Yeah.
But when we started, it was like, okay, let's just build one building. The property we figured out was going to hold 6 10,000 square foot buildings. We're like, hey, let's just start with this one and see how it goes. And, hey, if it doesn't go good, we can still got these other acreage. We can kind of let things change or figure out a different strategy for our buildings. And so once we got steel stood up on that one, we had a lease. We had a lease signed like that. And we're like, well, that was easy, And so it was like, what we were asking for lease, it was like, boom, we still had 2 months to go in construction. So, hey, we started the second one. Same thing, still went vertical, boom, lease in hand. Great. moved on to the third one, and it just kept rolling like that. You know, it was like the timing was right. That was coming out of, that was mid 2018. And, you know, it's just everything started clicking. So, you know, obviously learned a lot during the construction process of that, as far as the permitting, the actual construction of a multi-building project. So, you know, that job took us 2 years. It should have took us a little over a year, but you know, it was just that learning curve in between. But that project was still profitable when we exited. And I mean, even if it wouldn't have been profitable, if we'd have just broke even, that would have been the biggest learning experience I ever had in my life. And that's really what's kind of changed me going forward. So.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer, and I've said it multiple times in my life, you know, some of these things you just gotta do. It doesn't really matter how well you do, but just the learning experience that you get from them is so valuable. It's worth all the money in the world. It doesn't matter how much money you made on that first deal, because that basically has snowballed you into what you're doing today, which you're looking at larger deals. And so going back to a couple of things, one, I think it's important again to just reiterate that, you know, you built relationships, you're obviously honorable person, you know, you have that reputation, honesty and integrity. Those things are so important as you're getting started, and they stay with you. So whenever, you know, if you start to break out of that, then things can fall apart real fast. So it's very important always in anything with businesses, you know, your reputation is number one. Then with the GC that you found, could you elaborate on that? So you've done this deal with this GC. Do you still have a relationship with that GC?
I do. So yeah, he actually still buys buildings from us. And, you know, that was a good project for both of us, because he had done, you know, commercial construction, but his were more, he'd done some single tenant retail and helped some guys do some strip centers. So it was a learning curve for him as well on this project. But he helped make it a lot easier, and we were both heavily involved throughout it. You know, we both just didn't throw money at it and then step away and, you know, wish for the best with our subs. So we were both heavily involved, stayed through it till the end, worked on it together. And yeah, I'm still fortunate that I have that friendship with him. And we also went next door and did another deal after that one. So.
That's awesome. And then I assume once you performed this, even though initially on this one, right, he came in and gave you that bank financing for you as an individual moving forward, how is financing? Was it easier the second and third go round as you moved?
It got easier, yeah. And then the timing was right too. So when we were getting that one done, you know, into 2018, first of 19, you know, obviously, you know, we know where kind of rates started going after that. I mean, they were very reasonable. I think that first deal we borrowed money in the fives. And then of course our next deal, I think we were down in the threes when we borrowed money. So as far as when we were developing, the timing was just right. You know, money was free flowing from all the banks, especially for that type of asset class, because the banks, they love the industrial just as much as we did, but too, they love the area we were building in. So that was the big thing with financing is, hey, what are you building? Where are you building? And, you know, they knew that we had cost advantages too, so that we could show them that. And, you know, it was.
That you were experienced and understood what you were doing, obviously.
That's right. And, you know, too, how many development projects get off track because of construction? It's probably 95% of them. So usually when we hear about developer horror stories, you can track it back to somewhere in construction, whether it was their budget was wrong, you know, or they did something unexpected in the field, whether they hit rock or, you know, got on some bad soil. It was something that was inside that most likely changed that. So having a construction background and knowing all those things on the front end, I think makes the job easier on the back end.
Absolutely.
So on that, so once you've done that and you're moving forward, you know, you've contacted, and we were talking a little earlier that, you know, you got introduced to the one gentleman, then another agent that was a land wholesaler. I imagine something else happens too once you get one or two of these deals. Then the agents know you're for real. And then as opposed to you hounding, trying to find all these deals from everybody, people are then it kind of the table turns, right? People are starting to contact you. Is that what happened to you?
That's 100%. Yeah. So once we started having those deals flowing, the agent we were working with, hey, he was like, hey, when are you doing the next one? What are you doing? Send me the plans on it. Let me get it out there. I'm getting calls all the time. And so that helped us, like I said, get a lot of leasing done right in the middle of construction. And, just from there too, we had those relationships already built with the city where we were building. And so, hey, they were getting requests as well, for companies wanting to come in, and they'd be like, hey, do you have anything in this size, or can you do this or that? And I would be like, yes, we can, or no, we can't. But, I tell people when I meet them is, I try to tell them what I do, and you do the same thing, because the more people that know what you're doing, just like this, when you start doing something, I mean, it's just free flow of information. People contact you. Hey, do you have this? Do you have that? Or, hey, I know so-and-so that needs something here, reach out to him. So just building those relationships, letting people know what you're doing and doing what you say you're going to do.
That's awesome. Now, Cole, do you take on private investors? Do you just have specific people that you work with, or do you allow other people to come in and invest with you on projects?
Most of my stuff is just private. So I just have two guys that I deal with for money, and they're both very well off individuals, but they trust what I do. So if I need something, hey, I can call them. Do you pay a little higher interest rate? Yes, absolutely. But there are a lot of advantages with that too, as far as no appraisals. I don't do any syndication. I just started really learning about syndication a couple of months ago, but for right now, yes, it's just private only. So
Yeah, I think that's another advantage you have, honestly. Like you said, no appraisal, not dealing with the bank financing is just a game changer.
100%. Yeah. And I mean, during COVID and stuff, it was easy because, we could lock in those rates up front and they were low, but we're now getting to a point that's a little different. So, I've kind of found that I could get some private money just as cheap as the bank's money, but not have to jump through hoops to get it. You dang near got to give a bank a blood sample now before they'll loan you any money. So,
and I bet they're constantly pushing you to go find some more stuff so they can give you more money. And it's not like they just want their money sitting there. They want you to do more deals to give you more money, because they're, benefiting from, you putting all this stuff together. So it just kind of builds upon itself for you, I would assume.
yeah, absolutely. And those guys didn't make money by just having the money sit there in the bank and look at it. So they want it active. They want it spread out in their businesses. They want it in certain amounts of real estate in certain areas. So, I've been able to help them out there and help myself in return. So it's a win-win for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's listening to this can understand, kind of the snowball of what you've created and how you're benefiting not only yourself, you're benefiting the real estate agents, getting them transactions, you're benefiting the investors, you're keeping the bank moving, the cities that you're working in, for crying out loud, they're reaching out to you to help. So, I mean, you're benefiting so many different people and industries on top of all the labor forces that you're bringing work to. So it's an amazing thing, what you're doing.
And it's just because you decided to jump off the cliff.
I'd say it. I just took that step, closed my eyes and started and took the step.
Just go. Well, and all the relationships that you've built, relationships from the relationships came because you jumped off the cliff. So
that's it.
Yeah, that I think is a big takeaway for me.
And that's one of those things. I never quit learning, and I still make mistakes daily. I'm nothing. I don't consider myself special. I put on my pants the same way everybody else does, but I've just found out that I get more comfortable the more risk I take, and the more I learn. And like I said, it just comes from doing. So,
and you feel like now when you're doing it, it's more calculated. So you have probably a lot more self-confidence in what you're doing at this point, right? Because I'm sure it gets easier each one.
It does. Yeah. And then you find that ceiling, where you feel uncomfortable, and you just do your best to try to break through that barrier and get to the next level. So
now when you're doing these for the investor, now your couple investors that you work with, do you partner with anyone, or you do these all on your own?
No, I have a partner right now. So, and he does a lot of the ground stuff. I do a lot more of the permitting, engineering, a little bit of the project management. We just recently hired a project manager, kind of oversee some of our stuff. And then my guy, he kind of makes sure everything runs good on the ground, make sure the construction's going like it's supposed to, and everybody's doing what they're supposed to. So.
Yeah, I think it's important. A lot of people think to do these things, and everybody still has that mindset of doing it alone. When you get in this commercial development, you know, large retail strip centers and these large projects, I mean, you have to really bring a team together. It's so much to overtake for one person. And if you really want to be able to grow and do multiple deals and grow a company, you really got to, you know, open to working with others and finding trusted teammates and partners, I would assume.
Yeah, 100%. Because, you know, it's not like renovating a house where you can go in 30 days. Most of these commercial development projects are, you know, a minimum of 8 months to a year to start, you know, and sometimes they get into 2 years for them. So, you know, handling that alone, I mean, that's almost a recipe for disaster. So.
Yeah.
Wow. Cole, I mean, you've lived quite a interesting life. I mean, to say the least. I mean, you seem to have really gotten, you know, lucky to be involved in the pre-engineered metal building industry, but really have leveraged that knowledge and understanding to create a great career for yourself. And I think it's amazing. And, you know, I would strive to be able to do what you've done. And so I think others would agree that, man, you know, this is what people aspire to do, what you've done. So it's great. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. Now, what's the best way for somebody to reach you if they want to?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Cole Bigbee. You can also email me, colebigbee@bigbee.com, and I spell my name ColeBigbee. And you can also get me on my cell phone anytime. I'm happy to help. I love helping investors answer questions by phone to 214-726-6109. So feel free for anybody to reach out to me, and I'm happy to help. So.
And we'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cole, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we can get you on later and talk more about what you have coming up in the future. But I really appreciate you taking the time to sit and chat with us a bit today and let us get to know you more.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you guys and I appreciate what y'all are doing for the commercial real estate and investing in business community. I think it's podcasts like this that really help, you know, push people forward, help them learn, help them know that, you know, there's people out there that don't know it all, but they just start doing and they're still learning every day. And I'm one of those people. So I hope I can give hope to some of those out there that maybe haven't took the step yet, but want to. So
Yeah, I'm looking for a cliff right when I walk out of the door here. I'm going to.
there you go. Just open the door and just walk out.
Motivated on that one.
A great headspace for
That's
the
good stuff.
Hey, thanks again, Cole. Thanks so much. I appreciate it, man.
Hey, thank you guys.
All right, Cole. See you,
Have a
buddy.
great day.
Take care.